Hi, this is Jackie from Inky Antics with a video tutorial on how to blend colored pencils with a product called Gamsol. Gamsol is an artist brand of odorless mineral spirits, and we use it to blend regular colored pencils. When I say regular colored pencils, what I mean is the non-watercolor type. Gamsol doesn't have any water in it, so it won't break down watercolor pencils, but it does a great job with the regular wax-based kind. To do this, I don't have to fill in the entire area with color. I'm just lining the inside edges of the image. You can see I'm not drawing too heavy of a line of color, but it is a slightly wider line. For the pencils I'm using Prismacolor brand, which is my personal favorite, but you can use any brand as long as it's regular and not watercolor. I do suggest using an artist brand such as the one sold on our website just because they're more pigment rich and therefore a little easier to work with than school supply brands such as Crayola, Rose Art, and Prang. If you are using a school supply brand, you will still see a difference with the Gamsol, but just be aware that you may need to build a few more layers of color to achieve similar effects. To apply the Gamsol, I'm going to use a blending stump. The stump is basically a dry stick of compressed paper that's available in different sizes, and it's reusable. Before I begin, I want to make sure my stump tip is clean because colors from the stump do transfer onto the paper. So I'm grabbing my sandpaper pad, which will both clean and sharpen the stump at the same time. The sandpaper pad has several layers which can just be torn off as they're used up to reveal a new piece underneath. I'll hold my stump at a low angle with the tip almost parallel to the sandpaper to maintain my point as much as possible, and I'll start scrubbing the stump back and forth against the sandpaper as I turn it in my hand. The old color will sort of lint off, leaving me with a clean and sharp stump, so now I'm good to go. I'll take my bottle of Gamsol and squeeze it slightly to get some liquid onto the sponge, which is under the cap of the bottle, but only do that when the bottle's capped or the liquid will gush out. Take off the cap and roll the tip of the stump against the sponge once or twice to slightly dampen it. I'm starting with small circles right on top of the line of color. Gamsol is a solvent, so it melts the wax and it allows you to move the color around on the paper to get a soft, pretty look. Once I've melted down my color with small circles, then I continue to go around again and slowly begin to enlarge my circles to blend out the color. As I make my circles bigger and bigger, notice how I still return to the outside edges every single time I go around. It's kind of like a spirograph, where no matter how big my circles get, I still go back to the outer edges with each rotation, because what I'm doing at this stage, of course, is pulling and dragging my color from the outer edges in toward the center. That's what gives me that pretty light to dark highlighting and shading effect. It doesn't really matter what shape the area is, I still follow the same process where I use small circles first to melt the color, and then I go back and make larger circles to drag and pull that color out towards the middle. When I'm coloring and blending with Gamsol, I like to start by applying and blending the lightest color first. Now that I've got my light green layer done, I'm adding darker green accents just to add even more depth and a richer look to my image. Then I'll repeat the same blending process with the Gamsol. I don't need to clean and sharpen my stump at this point because I'm blending together two shades from the same color family, so I'm just adding a bit more Gamsol to the stump and then continuing on. I mentioned earlier that Gamsol is a solvent, which means it doesn't wet the paper, but instead it evaporates instantly. The great thing about that is that you can keep building layers of color and continue blending as much as you like without ever having to worry about the paper pilling up or shredding or buckling or warping. And you don't even have to use special cardstock. Any smooth, uncoated cardstock should work fine. Here I'm using a plain white cardstock made by Georgia Pacific that I picked up at Walmart. Now I'll start adding my light brown pencil to other areas of the image. Since the spots on the turtle's shell are fairly small, I don't have to put very much color along the edges. Because I'm changing to a completely different color family, I do want to clean and sharpen my stump on the sandpaper before I move on. People sometimes ask me, how often do you need to reapply the Gamsol to the stump? There isn't really a set amount, but what I usually say is to start with less, and you can always add more. As you work with the Gamsol, you'll develop a feel for how much to add. By the way, notice how I'm pointing the tip of the stump toward the edge of the image and turning the paper to help with positioning. I think this just makes it easier to control where I'm blending my color. So back to the question about how much Gamsol to use. Basically, when you feel that the color is no longer melting or moving on the paper, then go ahead and reload with more Gamsol. And there's my finished image, completely colored and blended. One safety note I wanted to mention is that because it's a solvent, Gamsol is not recommended for use if you're pregnant or nursing. If that's the case, please use another blending method until after baby arrives and you're done nursing. For example, on our website, we carry a colorless blending pencil that would be a good alternative. You can find this by clicking on the Accessories tab and then looking in the Coloring and Blending section near the Gamsol and related supplies. Besides what type of paper and pencils to use, people sometimes ask what ink pad I use to stamp my image. For this video, I stamped our little turtle with a Ranger archival ink pad. It happens to be a waterproof ink, but you don't have to use a waterproof pad if you don't want. Any quick-drying, non-smearing, dye-based ink pad should work fine. For example, Sukaniko Memento and Clear Snap Vivid are good choices. I also like Stays-On pads for my wood-mounted stamps, which happens to be a solvent-based ink that's permanent. I don't use Stays-On with our clear sets, however, only on red rubber. But again, you don't have to use a waterproof or permanent pad. As long as it's dye-based and not the pigment type of pad, it should be okay. I think blending colored pencils with Gamsol is such a fantastic technique, and I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial.